Welcome back everybody to this series on climbing the rating ladder. Today I will show you what you should be doing to reach the 1200 on chess.com rapid. Now, please also listen to me carefully if you're around 1200 on chess.com, because I will show you the typical mistakes that you're likely facing in your games. This is my personal project that I want to really track the progress or the evolution of certain steps in our chess life. Are there some skills, for example, that are evolving in a certain order as we grow stronger as chess players? Yes, I'm sort of doing the developmental psychological work in chess improvement. I'm doing it also personally for myself, because this way I will become a much stronger teacher, so I can give you much more specific advice, for example, for you to reach the next level. Also, please take this series as a long-term tool for yourself that you can revisit as you progress in your chess career. And please give me feedback and your comments on YouTube so that I can also improve on this content. Again, we are looking at this rating distribution on chess.com. 1200 is not an easy feat to achieve, folks. Look at how many players are there on chess.com that are below the level 1200, right? Chess improvement is not easy. People have plateaus, right? That we are slowing down our progress time to time. So we just need to work harder to reach the next step. And it's never going to be so easy for each level. So please listen to me carefully today, that you can take good lessons of the likely issues that you're facing and how to reach the next level. Also, I'm doing it because I want to avoid, right, this routine advice of study tactics. Study tactics. You know, chess is 99% tactics. If you do your puzzles, you will reach the next level. This is a generic advice which ignores the specifics of chess. There's more to chess than simple puzzle solving. I'm not saying that puzzles are not important. That's of course important. But in this series, I will also give you much more specific advice on which areas of your game that you should be focusing on and what kind of mistakes that are recurring in your level. Okay? So let's discuss these 4 questions. These 4 questions will guide us in this entire series. As always, I'll be showing you the typical errors at lower levels today, around 1000. And then in the end, I will show you what kind of skills 1200 has that is not present on the level before. And again, I will give you much more specific advice on what you should be doing to reach the 1200. And also, in the end, right, I will tell you the typical errors around 1200. So you are aware of these issues. And this will also connect to the next episode on how we can reach the 1500. Okay, so let's begin with the first question. Remember from the last episode, we see typical mistakes around 1000. That's where we were left in the last episode. So these were the big 5 type of mistakes that are faced by level 1000 that we saw in the previous episode, folks, right? They were having blunders or single thread problems, for example, around trappable pieces, right? Whenever there's a trappable piece, they were ignoring those and they were allowing the opponent to trap those pieces, for example. Interesting, yeah? Interesting type of observation. And also, 3-ply calculation, remember, was doable for 1000, but deeper calculations was missed. Also, remember, they were wasting so much time in the opening with needless pawn moves. And also, they have no regards for weak squares, for example. They were doing mindless exchanges. Whenever there's an exchange option, they were just going for it blindly, right? And also, I will show you an example, right? Chess crimes regarding letting down their own pieces. I will show you exactly what I mean by showing you these positions. Remember, level 1000, they were letting down their pieces as going c3 in this case. Oh my god. The bishop on b2 is crying, and white was doing it to himself. That's a textbook definition of a chess crime, and this pattern was pervasive around 1000. People's positional mistakes were usually this type, that the feeling for the pieces were quite poor, and they were making moves like this with no regard with their own pieces. Instead, of course, knight g5 was the best move, challenging the e-file, looking at the e6 square, and also improving the worst placed piece. Remember, around 1200, these things are starting to be resolved, and that's also exactly what I will argue today. This will be like an interesting link for you folks. Remember, level 1000, they were making too many pawn moves in the opening. So this game really shows us nicely what I mean by this. This was also in the last episode, folks. Just watch this game very, very fast and look how many pawn moves are made for both sides in this game. This was very typical pattern that whenever there's an option for to make a pawn move, they were making it, and they were also it was very difficult also to keep the tension on the board. Yeah, they were just keep making with the pawn moves over and over again, as in this case, right? Also, there were no regard for weak squares, for example. In this case, black, of course, should take back with the pawn to cover d5, but this was also completely missing around 1000. So these things are improving slowly around 1200, as we'll see in today's episode. Yeah, another pawn move, and I stop here. You get the basic idea. Remember, level 1000, trappable pieces, blunder patterns around trappable pieces was pervasive. In this position, you have 4 choices. Where should knight move? You tell me, folks. This, or this. Remember, level 1000, they were making this move, allowing h5. The knight has no square left from the square. The knight is trapped. So this was a very typical pattern which I observed in my search in this project, that this was a big problem for 1000. 1200, these kind of errors are reduced. They start paying more attention to piece mobility, and these kind of blunders are becoming less around this level. Let's continue with the things that 1200 can do, folks, that is not so present on the level before. White to play in this position. It's equal material. I want you to come up with a plan for white that was found by a 1200 person. Congratulations if you saw this beautiful e6 outpost, and if you look at this knight and you found it to be a bad piece in this position, thus you formed a plan, knight e2 followed by knight f4 and knight e6. For the first time around here, I think, maneuvering to a weak square is emerging. People are not seeing their bad pieces, they see those big squares and they transfer those pieces to those big squares. Interesting. Just look how beautifully white is playing this segment of the game. That is totally doable for a 1200 person. So going back, that's interesting, right? That around here, that's my hypothesis so far. The best explanation of the data I observed so far. That only around here, people start playing great positional chess around weaknesses, around bad pieces, and form long-term plans of transferring their pieces to good spots. And that's incredibly beautiful achievement, actually. If you constantly apply these lessons, what is my worst place piece? Where are the weaknesses in the position? Can I put a worst place piece to a superb spot in 3 moves? You're on the right track. And please tell me, folks, are we able to do these things? For example, was this puzzle an easy puzzle for you, right? Did you see white's plan as well? And what is your rating? I'm very curious about this, actually. Were you, for example, able to see it despite you being much lower than 1200? Please tell me your observations. Am I on the right track? Are you, for example, already 1200 person and you're still seeing these things? Or maybe you're missing these things, right? Obviously, everybody's chess progress is different, but we are talking about general trends here. General trends. What I observed so far, that this was within reach for a 1200 person to find this plan. Beautiful. Talking about pawn storms, opening and closing up the position, folks, I will show you a very interesting segment from a game between a 1200 player with white pieces and a little less than 1200 with black pieces. He was around 1100, and that's interesting. I think there's a skill difference here that is visible in this segment, because black in this position, he starts off with a very interesting move, g5. To me, this signals a really good understanding of the position, right? Because the kings have castle on opposite flanks here, which means it's about pawn storm, it's about attack, it's about opening up lines for your pieces that will decide this game. And g5 looks like a beautiful move because black signals that he wants to open up lines on the king's side for attack against the white king. And after bishop g3, black plays g4. Oh my god, what I just said was completely incorrect, because black voluntarily closes down the king's side with this move. So this again shows me that this is an orientation problem, understanding problem. This is actually totally about understanding. Black misunderstands the gist of the position, right? The gist is to open up the king's side for an attack against the white king. Otherwise, white will start opening up lines on the queen's side and go for an attack against the black king. We follow the same game after a few moves, folks. Look what is change in the position. The king side is completely closed. The white king will be extremely secure on the h2 square. And now watch how a 1200 person starts threatening this position. What should white do? You tell me. Indeed, he starts the queenside pawn storm with b4. What's the next move? He tucks down the king. He plays like Gary Kasparov. In the middle of an attack, he just tucks the king first because this is coming, right? No one can stop this plan, which was found by white in the actual game. Black cannot open up anything on the king side, but comes a4 plus b5 is coming and the pawn storm will be achieved. 1200 person can see it. That's my hypothesis, folks. They are also starting to understand whether they should open up or close down the position in such sharp middle game positions where kings have castled on opposite flanks, right? Just look how beautifully white starts playing this segment. Black is totally clueless and planless. And then, yeah, b5 is a beautiful move. Please take my pawn. Please take my pawn because that will only help my pieces. I will start attacking your king. It's a beautiful positional pawn sacrifice. Black doesn't take, but then black position just collapses. Just collapses. There are many ways for white to treat this position. White finds, let's say, the most materialistic way, but it's just extra pawns. Interesting, white doesn't go for a competitive winning pawn ending, which is still an issue, by the way, around 1200. This is just competitive winning for white. Instead, white takes one more pawn. White takes one more pawn and white wins like this. Okay, people have different styles because the white king is so safe. No one can attack this king and white decides to win the game like this. Okay, so black just resigns in this position. 1200. They can go a little deeper than 3-ply calculation. Remember, 1000, the limit was around 3-ply. They were having really hard times in looking one more deeper. Around 1200, you see more depth in the calculations. For example, in this position, the black queen is attacked by the white rook. And can you find black's next move? Yes, black simply takes the knight because he can see and visualize that once you take my queen, I take your queen and your rook is still being attacked, right? You can see all these moves, and after rook b3, he sees one more move, knight a5, followed by knight takes c4, right? And at the end of this calculation, when you take a step back, you understand that black actually emerged with 2 pawns up in this position, with a completely winning position, right? Going back to this moment, right? After rook b1. This is totally within reach for 1200 to go a little bit deeper because it's 1-ply, right? Second ply, 1-ply, and he can still see that the rook is actually hanging. And then he can even visualize the next move on the board with knight a5, followed by knight takes c4, right? So this calculation base is growing. That's great. That's great news. But the problem is that once black achieves this winning position, there comes the consistency failures. Look how black spoils this position despite being 2 pawns up. Black, for some reason, pushes the pawn directly, and this gives white pieces some extra squares, like on b5, for example. And after knight c3, which hints at knight b5, black panics and goes rook b8 and allows bishop takes b8. Incredible, right? One common problem for 1200 is the lack of consistency. People sometimes play beautiful games, amazingly beautiful, even positionally beautiful, calculation-wise great games, and they can still hang a piece like that, right? Shows us chess is such a cruel game that requires constant attention, constant concentration, and you should be raising your floor. You should cut down those mistakes to 0 in your games to reach the next level, because if you, even for a single move, if you hang a piece in your games, it doesn't matter, right? The game is over. So black is actually so interesting. Yeah, black actually engaged in this beautiful calculation here. Yeah, emerge with 2 pawns up after nice visualizations, and you achieve this position. And after 2 moves, you're hanging your rook, right? Just look at this discrepancy between different skills. So really, the goal should be to minimize those errors. It's like a ghost, right? It's just hanging pieces. It's like a ghost that is haunting us from the past. They're always there, right? Those mistakes are always there, waiting for us to be made. But yes, we should resist those. We should really raise our floor. Before you make a move, you should always check the board, right? This is about the board vision. It's about safety, which was a huge problem before 800, right? But you see, no one is immune. That's a lesson. No one is totally immune to such blunders. But obviously, masters they don't make mistakes like this, right? They really raise their floor in this case. And if you really want to reach the next level, try to minimize those errors, folks. This middle game position is really interesting, folks, because it shows me what 1200s can do that is not present for level 1000. For the first time, they start implementing typical middle game ideas, typical ideas in certain middle games, right? And that's a very interesting thing in itself. Opening stage has become more goal directed. Remember, there are not so many crazy pawn moves in the opening. It's much more order. So they develop their pieces and they start playing more thoughtfully in the opening. And now in this position, which is actually a French structure, it's actually good French for black because he manages to exchange off the terrible French bishop. Right, white has this beautiful pawn on e5, which is actually serving the kingside attacks in the middle game. Can you find a good plan for white, please? Yes, white goes h4, h5, a typical idea in the French advanced, plus obviously here because the kings have castled on opposite flanks, right? So obviously attack and dynamism is the most important imbalance in this position, and white finds this. Black focuses on his own plan, comes h5, and here actually black blunders with b5 because black allows queen g4, and the threat is not only, right, the hanging knight on g6, but actually, you guessed it right? The threat actually is knight takes d5. Black totally misses this idea, which is a very typical also blunder issue around this level. People perceive moves in a unidirectional way. They don't look at every single idea that is presented by the opponent's last move. Funny thing is this, even white misses this threat. Even for white, right, for a 1200 person, this move was a unidirectional move. He was only focusing on the threat on g7. So he missed altogether this idea of knight takes d5. That's why he goes h6. Obviously, right, white should have taken on d5 in this position because the pawn cannot be recaptured, because the queen on d7 is hanging. Beautiful tactical vision, folks. He misses this. h6 is a great positional move because white is burying the knight on h8. Right? This is an emerging skill that is not present around 1000, folks. So we should actually applaud the white player here to find this beautiful middle game plan. So we come to this interesting position. And what we will see from here typically shows us the issues that are faced around 1200. Because check this out. White in this position starts to only focusing on his plan and starts missing the threats that are faced in the position. Also, for example, white player totally misses this knight takes d5 resource because the knight cannot be recaptured because of this tactic, right? And it's interesting because black pushes the pawn, obviously, but black doesn't see the threat himself, and white doesn't see the idea itself, so knight e2 is on the board. And a5 is very logical. Black starts pushing the pawns on the queen side, the pawn storm is rolling, and here white goes wrong, bishop h4, because white is only focusing on his own plan. Thus, white ignores the threat on the pawn on e5, which is missed by black, by the way. He doesn't take it, but a4 is actually a very good move. Black is actually focusing on its own plan on the queen side. And here comes c3. This is a chess crime because white is making a weakening move around the king. White is losing time in an extremely sharp position, and white weakens the king as a result. Right? So this is actually typical chess crimes, positional mistakes that is present at level 1200. More on that later on in the series, but this is a great start. And how do you punish such moves? Black should have played, you tell me. a3, obviously. This will destroy the whole chain on the queen side, and this will open up lines for black, right? Black would say, thank you so much for giving me one more weakness and time, most importantly. And now I'm going to destroy you on the queen side. But black doesn't find this move. Black goes queen c7 instead. Interesting. White sees the threat on e5 right now. Takes again. a3 will be better. And here comes, well, you tell me, folks. Do you think black should take on h4? Or black should wait for white to take on e7? Yeah? What's the correct exchange? Please find the right move for black. In the actual game, instead of pushing the pawn on a3 and disturbing white king and attacking on the queen side, black takes on h4. Wow. Exchanging on the opponent's terms. That's exactly what you mean, right? And can you see what threat black is facing right now, folks. That's interesting. That's the most interesting part here. Yes, black is facing a big threat of queen f6 followed by queen g7, and this will connect to the final phase. Around 1200, people tend to miss such moves, especially if they are recaptures, because in black's head, right? Oh, queen takes h4 is just a normal recapture, right? So he refuses to see the threats that are presented as a result of this recapture. That's my hypothesis so far. And he totally ignores the threat and he goes knight takes e5. And you tell me what's next move? Bam, queen f6, and black resigns. An amazing game. An amazing game. A typical pattern that is visible around here, as I mentioned, exchanging on the opponent's terms and totally ignoring the threats that are presented. Also, this will tie down to my final segment. People around 1200, they tend to blunder like this. I make a move, as in this case, then my opponent makes a move and creates an unstoppable threat. This is a beautiful pattern that repeats itself around 1200. That's exactly how people blunder around this level. Typical issues faced by 1200s. What I observed so far, folks, is that they tend to miss certain threats. This is a puzzle for you. Black goes 97 here. And you tell me, first of all, what you're seeing. What is the most important question you must ask yourself always? And what should white do in this position? Congratulations if you saw c6 as a threat, because then your bishop will be trapped. Remember trappable pieces? In the actual game, white ignored this threat and went a4 and allowed the move c6, and the bishop is lost. My hypothesis is that around 1200, people tend to miss threats if the opponent's last move was a retreat, right? Because they perceive those moves, oh, just a random retreat, so I'm not scared about your move, it just looks like a stupid move, right? And this caused them to see the threats that they are facing. So what's the lesson? Even though the opponent's last move is a simple looking retreat, you should always follow this algorithm, right? Am I facing a threat? What has changed, right? What has changed? What can you do right now to me? If it was opponent's move again, what would be their move? That's always, always, always the first question you must ask yourself, folks, right? Don't interpret moves in a unidirectional way, but always search deeper. One more is coming. In this game, black goes rook d6, hitting the queen. The white queen goes to f1. What are you seeing? What should black do in this position? Congratulations, folks. If you perceive this move not only a simple escape, right? Because the queen just escaped from my attack on the rook, it seems. Yeah, this just looks like a passive escape, right, by the queen. In fact, you're facing a big threat of queen c4 double attack, right? Queen c4 check is coming. In the actual game, black missed this. He goes e4. Queen c4 will be nice for white. And after knight g1, black still missed the real threat that was present on the board with queen c4. And black went rook d2, came queen c4, and black lost the piece. So again, my observation is that this is a typical blunder pattern that or seeing a threat pattern actually, that people tend to miss the threats if the enemy move was a simple looking retreat or just a simple escape, right? You hit something, they move, and then you don't notice what the ideas are as a result of that move. Interesting observations, right? Again, one level higher, more advanced than level 1000 blunders, but this is also quite interesting, right? So the lesson is this again, folks, 1200s out there. Please look deeper on the enemy moves. Whenever they make a move, don't judge them in the face value. Always ask yourself the same question. What has changed? Am I facing a threat right now? What will be their next move? Talking about chess crimes. Remember? I showed you a crazy looking chess crime at the very beginning of today's video. That white just went c3 and voluntarily buried his own bishop on b2. 1200s, they are better. They don't let down their pieces as crazy as in the first example. But they are engaging in other chess crimes, as in this case. White to play in the actual game. White player went f4. Oh my god. And white player just gave this amazing e4 outpost to the black knight for no reason. So this chess crime is called awakening the enemy pieces. white makes an unforced strategic blunder, f4, and only makes the enemy knight happier, right? So this is also very pervasive around 1200, which I observed. Interesting, right? It's again one advanced level, one level more advanced than the first chess crime, around 1000. But this is still a terrible positional move that I should be really trying to fix to reach the next level, folks. Whenever you make a pawn move, you should ask yourself, is it making one of my pieces more active? Or is it actually helping one of the enemy pieces? And many players neglect that final question. If you ask yourself that question, well, I mean, this knight is buried, restricted by the pawn on f3, but the moment you push the pawn right, whoa, things have changed. So if you get this guideline, nice guideline of pawns and pieces, also the enemy pieces, then you will start avoiding those chess crimes, folks. And I'm sure your positional play will improve tremendously. And finally, my final observations for 1200 mistakes, positional mistakes. They tend to handle rook endgames really poorly, right? Rook endgames. It's all about activity, right? Your rook must play an active role in rook endgames. It's white to play here, folks. Please tell me, what is the best move for white? Structurally, right, you are in a terrible shape. Black will attack all your weaknesses. But you have an okay rook on the d file right now. That's an active piece. Congratulations if you found the move rook d6, folks. Beautiful, active operation. The rook is engaging in this active defense, and white definitely has enough resources, right, to save a draw, because right now my rook improved. I will drive your king away by invading 7th rank. I'm putting pressure on your pawn on b5, and this is by far the only defense for white, but also the best defense, the most active defense to hold the game. Now, once you see the real solution, can you guess the chess crime which happened in the actual game? Yes. The white player, 1200 player, went rook c1. Oh my god, this rook is crying on c1. Only purpose is to defend a weak pawn on c3. White is giving all the momentum to black. Black can even go rook c5 right now and win a pawn for nothing. But also rook c4 is in the game actually. Is also a great move, right? Black will put tremendous pressure. Black will activate the king, and black will later push the pawns on the queen side and get a much more advantageous position. So my hypothesis and observation so far is around 1200, people's handling of rook endgames are quite poor. They have not yet assimilated those lessons that rook endgame should be played with an active rook, and to tie down your rook to random weak pawns is a mild chess crime in those endings. Keep that in mind, folks, to be able to reach the 1500. Let's have a recap, folks, and consider what we learned today in today's video, right? Very briefly, skills that 1200 ELO have that is not so much present on lower levels is that, you see, their opening play is improved, there's more order, there are fewer pawn moves in the opening, and for the first time you see typical middle game ideas that are emerging, that are starting to be implemented, right? h4, h5 in the French advanced, for example, right? Also, the first signs of maneuvering a bad piece to a weak square. Remember, knight c3 to e to f4 to e6 maneuver that it was the first time I witnessed when I was looking at different games on different levels, folks. Interesting, right? Feeling for the pieces improves. That's always a great sign when you play positional chess. And also, they start to also engage in when to open or close in opposite side castling pawn storm positions. Remember, just below 1200, he was struggling to open up the king side with the crime g4, but the 1200 was great in finding a4, b4, b5, opening up the queen side to attack the enemy king. Interesting. Around this level, people also start understanding those middle game ideas. Okay? And of course, obviously, better board vision and safety compared to 1000, but we'll come back to the potential issues very soon, folks. And 3-ply calculation is of course possible. They can go a little bit deeper as well. Remember that position, 5-ply was doable, but the issue was the consistency, and we are coming back to it. So what should be the focus to reach 1200? Obviously, tactical training and calculation training are very important. You should do them on a daily basis. Calculation can go a little bit deeper than 3-ply. Mate in 2 puzzles are still great. You can go for mate in 3 puzzles, for example, just to enlarge the base and vision a little bit further, right? Go a little bit deeper in those lines. Give yourself some time to solve the puzzles. And obviously, threat perception is very important. Remember, in today's video, we were checking some examples that people were having trouble in perceiving the threats as a result of the opponent's moves being, for example, retreats or simple looking recaptures, right? You should be very much aware of these issues as well to reach the next level. And basic middle game strategy plans you should follow, right? You should actually learn basic setups in your openings and also try to start to focus on middle game ideas. I'm not talking about memorization. I'm talking about basic setups. Golden rules in the opening are still with you, right? Please follow those golden rules. Don't crazy memorize moves. It's not important yet in your stage, but get your openings, take a middle game book from your opening and know the ideas. Internalize those ideas. They will really serve you well. Obviously, positionally, improve your feel for the pieces so you don't engage in such chess crimes as we saw in the very first example of today's video. And to finish up, what are the typical errors for 1200 so you can also be aware of to reach the next level, and this will connect to our next video as well in the series. Remember, if the opponent's last move was a retreat or recapture, you tend to miss the threats. In fact, you should always follow the algorithm, right? Whenever your opponent makes a move, you should take it seriously and you should ask yourself, am I facing a threat right now as a result of that move? What would be their move if I just don't make a move right now? That's always the first question you must ask yourself, by the way. You cannot go wrong with that question, folks. Obviously, remember, they were blundering. If they were blundering, for example, like this, in this pattern, yeah? I make a move, then my opponent creates a threat that I'm helpless against. They were blundering unstoppable threats. Remember, this is a very pervasive pattern here, which means they're able to check for blunders in terms of checks, right? They can see, for example, the opponent's checks as a result of their move, also captures, but, right, they are missing the opponent's threats, unstoppable threats that they can generate as a result of their move. Please be aware of this pattern, which means you should also, right, go a little bit deeper and perceive the opponent's moves a little bit in depth, not only for checks or captures, but also what kind of threats they would present to my position. Okay, big problem. Consistency. Guys, I've seen so many beautifully executed games, amazing games by 1200s, positionally, tactically, but they were hanging a rook or queen in the end, right? This consistency problem is a huge problem for a long time. And as they say, right, you're as strong as your weakest link in chess. Even in a single move, if you blunder your rook or queen in actual games, well, then your rating won't catch up with your true strength, right? Or your true strength is actually as strong as that because you're still hanging pieces, right? So this is so important that we should be working on fixing our fundamentals. Obviously, no one is immune to blunders. We all blunder in chess, but masters, they really cut down on those basic blunders, like you make a move and you just hang a piece that just can be captured directly, right? I'm talking about very simple blunders like that you should really try to cut as soon as possible. Also, you tend to play very fast. If they are rapid games, you have 10 minutes on your clock and you're making moves like in 5 seconds in a critical moment, right? Please take more time. Use your time in your clock. And that will also increase. That will actually raise your floor as well. Just giving yourself some time in a critical moment, folks. Chess is a deep game that needs more time and consideration, yeah? And finally, rook endings, the most common endgame type in chess. You're also treating them poorly, positionally speaking, because you tend to play with a passive rook. You tend to tie down your rook to defense of weak pawns. Instead, you should play rook endgames with an active rook. And if you internalize this lesson, your rook ending will also improve. Thank you for staying with me, folks, and I hope you learned some nice lessons. I hope this video will be helpful for you. You can always revisit this video in the future. The lessons will be here for you. Please give me some feedback. Send me your comments. Maybe your progress is different than is described here. Everybody is different, of course. I'm talking about general trends and patterns. And next video, right, we'll look at how we can reach the level 1500, starting from where we left today. And please give me a like so we can reach more people. You can check my Chessable courses for content, similar educational content on Chessable. And I will catch you on the next video. I'm wishing you all the best. Have a great day. Bye-bye.